We're gonna be doing a Q&A session with comic book writer Charles Soule. Best-selling author. He has written characters that we love from both Marvel, DC, Star Wars. Just to give you an example of the characters he's worked on: Swamp Thing, Superman, Wonder Woman, Red Lanterns, Thunderbolts, She-Hulk, Inhumans, Wolverine, Daredevil, X-Men, Star Wars, all of those he has worked on. Also, he has creator-owned comics, curse words, Undiscovered Country, 8 Billion Genies, Hell to Pay, and others. He's also a best-selling author. He has 4 novels. One of them is the first Star Wars High Republic novel. And it is my honor to bring you guys this Q&A with Charles Soule.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So, first question. Is this your first time here in Puerto Rico?
It is my first time in Puerto Rico. I have spent most of my time in Puerto Rico in this building, which is too bad, but everybody who comes to the table is like, you have to go see.
Yes.
Actually, mostly what they say is you have to go eat.
Yes.
Everyone is saying the food, the food, the food, the food. So I've been trying. I've had mofongo, which I thought was incredible.
Yes.
People clap for mofongo more than they do for me. I thought it was so good. I had it with like little cubes of fried pork.
Yes.
It was incredible.
That's how you do it, yeah.
Incredible.
Garden food.
Yeah. So it was really good. I would even have it again. But very filling. You know,
Yes.
like I could only have half of it because it filled me up so quickly. And I felt.
Oh, you get used to it, and then you'll have more.
I guess I felt like I was like committing a terrible sin on Easter weekend by not finishing it. But it was a lot, but it was delicious.
Awesome. So how has the experience with the fans been here in Puerto Rico?
Amazing. Everybody is so kind and nice, and it's been a nice mix of people who know my work well and are really excited to meet me and talk about things I've written, but also many people just come up to the table and are like, so what do you do? And so it's been fun to talk to people. I always love talking to kids who come to the table, who, especially younger, like teenagers, who are maybe interested in becoming writers or artists in comics, and so you can kind of talk to them and encourage them.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, that kind of stuff.
Cool. ¿Tiene una pregunta?
Yeah.
Okay.
Since you mentioned about the working with kids, when I was at your table, you mentioned about working with the book with your daughter.
Yes.
Can you talk to us about that experience? How was it?
Of course. So my daughter's name is Rosemary. She is 17 years old. She's actually here, but she decided to go sit by the pool instead of coming to this. Although it's rainy today, so who knows?
Yeah.
But anyway, yes, I'm glad she's getting time to do that. But we, about 2 years ago, Lucasfilm came to me. I do a lot of writing for Star Wars, all these different things, and they said, you know, we're thinking about doing a kid's book, a children's book set in the High Republic, and would you like to do that? And I said, well, I've never done a book for little children before, and so the idea came up of me writing it with my daughter, who at the time was probably 14 or something like that. And the book is about, it's called Jedi Brave in Every Way, and the story is about these 3 little young Jedi in training, younglings, who are afraid. They hear about everything Jedi do when they're grown up, like lightsaber fights and, you know, jumping onto monsters and all these things. They're like, we don't want to do that, that's terrifying. And so Yoda and a Wookiee named Buryaga decide to help them not be afraid. And so when the idea came to work with my daughter, Rosemary, on doing it, I was like, this will be a really good idea because she's young and I'm older, and so I don't remember. I mean, everybody remembers what it's like to be a little kid, kind of, but she remembers it because it was recent for her.
Right.
And so she was able to talk to me about, well, this is what it feels like or felt like to be afraid of the dark or afraid of bugs. And she had some, because each one of the little Jedi is afraid of a different thing, and so Yoda helps them beat that particular fear. And one of the things she talked about that I was never really afraid of, but she told me was being alone. And so, because it's, you know, you're just like, what if nobody ever comes and I'm just alone forever? And so that was, I would never have thought of that. And that's one of the wonderful things about working with other people is you see things in a different way. But then we were able to talk about, well, when you're alone, you're not really alone because you have your imagination and you have your memories and you can find ways to not feel so alone. And that ended up, we did a reading at a school in New York City, like a little kid's school, and all of the kids had read the book. And so they asked us questions like you guys are doing, and they all, not all, but many of them locked into that fear. They were like, we feel afraid when we're alone sometimes, so this was really nice. And so Rosie was really proud. I call her Rosie, we call her Rosie. And so she was really like proud that she had found a way into it that was different.
And they connected with
with the kids.
Yeah.
So I thought it was great. I'm like, what a wonderful thing, like to work with your child, your daughter, to make a creative thing that's out in something so big as Star Wars. She, goes on panels, she talks to people, she signs books, and it's really a good thing for her as a young person. Yeah.
That's really cool. One of the questions I have, looking at your body of work, you could say that you have a massive body of work in maybe a short amount of time.
Yeah.
So my question about that is, how do you do it? How do you keep yourself motivated, disciplined, and how far ahead do you have to be to have everything come out in time?
Right. So you're correct. Okay. I have written. My first professional thing came out in 2009. It was a graphic novel called Strongman about a lucha libre wrestler living in New York. And my first thing for what's called the Big Two, which would be Marvel or DC, was a comic called Swamp Thing, which started coming out in 2013. So really, it all started in 2013. So in about 10 years, I have published hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comic books. Just in the Star Wars run I'm doing right now, that run is like 2,000 pages of comics, and that's just like a tiny chunk of what I do.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a lot. And so how do I do it, and why do I do it? I think I'm a little, but it also makes me so happy. Like, I'm getting to do the job that many people think is a dream job. I think it's a dream job. I get to work with these things that meant so much to me growing up. So that's kind of the why, and it also pays money. Money is good. But how do I do it? You think of it like an Olympic athlete, okay? And in order to do their sport, it's kind of all they think about, right? They're always thinking about, what am I eating today? What am I exercising? What am I training? How am I thinking about how my time today will be used toward the event that I have to compete in? And that is kind of how I approach the constant writing that I have to do. Every minute of every day, I'm thinking about, when do I get my time to write? How do I use my time to write? What are the deadlines that are coming up? What are the stories I need to have going on in my subconscious to build them? So it doesn't sound fun, but it is fun, because it lets me build this huge body of work. And 8 Billion Genies connects with people in a different way than Jedi Brave in Every Way does.
Right.
And Hell to Pay connects with people in a different way than Swamp Thing would. And so I feel like every one of the stories I tell is a way to connect with somebody, and sometimes many, many people, and it's all, what a wonderful job, what a wonderful thing to do. So it's very easy to get motivated. I get tired sometimes, but it's easy.
How do you avoid burnout?
I'm not sure that I have. I think you exist. It's like the Olympic athlete thing again. I'm not an Olympic athlete, but you just exist in this state where all you're thinking about is story and writing, and you don't think about too many other things. And so burnout. Do you know the story of the frog in the pot of boiling water?
No, I don't.
Okay, so this is imagine a frog who gets put in a pot of cold water, and the frog is swimming around, happy, whatever. Then somebody lights a fire under that pot, and the water gets hotter and hotter and hotter, but the frog doesn't realize it because it happens gradually. And eventually, the frog is in a pot of boiling water, and they're just, it's not good for the frog, but they didn't realize it while it was happening. And so that's kind of what it's like with my writing career, which I know sounds very negative and bad. It's not bad, it's wonderful, but the only time I really have trouble is when I try to relax, almost, when I try to not do it.
Okay.
Because I'm so used to constantly writing and telling stories that when I'm not doing it, I'm like, I don't know what to do with myself. I need to write another story.
That's awesome.
Sounds terrible, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, being the writer of The Death of Wolverine,
Yeah.
how much editorial decision was to decide how he was killed?
That was my decision. Marvel came to me and said, we want you to tell that story, to tell the death of Wolverine. You have 4 issues. You will be working with the incredible Steve McNiven, who is one of the best artists in all of comics for many years, and is a very, very good friend of mine. We've done a lot of work together. So they said, you can decide, you can figure it out. And now I had to present some ideas to Marvel to make sure that the editor and so on approved of what I was doing, because it was a huge, huge book. Like Wolverine dying was a gigantic story, and so they wanted it to be good. So I had another idea first that they were like, we don't think this is the direction. But then the second idea I had was the idea that was in the book. And so I got there pretty quickly, but what I knew from the start was that I didn't want him to just die in a big battle with like 1,000 ninjas or something like that, because we've seen Wolverine defeat 1,000 ninjas before, and so why would this time be different? And so the story needed to feel symbolic and powerful in a way that was unique, which is honestly learning that lesson on Death of Wolverine, which was in 2014. I wrote it in 2013, 2014, is a lesson that has carried through to every story I tell now, right? Because you don't want to tell a story that's the same as the stories everybody else has read, especially because a lot of times those stories would be better than the stories I might tell. Like my version of it might not be as good, but if I tell something totally new, a new story, nobody else is competing with it. I'm just, it's just a new thing.
Good point. Yep, go ahead.
So I kind of have 2 questions.
Sure.
The first one would be, so you've written both novels and comics, so which one do you like writing more? And then the second one would be, in pretty much, I'm not going to say most, but a lot of your projects, you're working with other people. How is that dynamic when it comes to writing, and do you enjoy it, and what are the challenges and upsides to it?
Sure. So novels and comics are really different, right? Because a comic issue is generally speaking 20 pages. You write it, you send it to the artist, they interpret it, it comes back, you do things to it to get the lettering and the wording right, and then it goes out. Novels are something I work on, at minimum, I work on 1 novel for a year and a half, sometimes much longer. My latest one, The Endless Vessel, which is, I'm very proud of it. I have a few copies left at my table, just so you know. Took me over 3 years to write. And so it's a different process. Like writing a novel is like climbing Mount Everest and then climbing it again and then climbing it again and climbing it again through all the edits. But when you're finished with it, you have this beautiful diamond of a story that you've polished and shined and made perfect over all this time, and it's so difficult and so consuming that I'm amazed that anyone has ever written any novels because it's so hard, but I'm so proud of the ones I've made. So it feels different, right? Whereas writing a comic is more like, you're writing like a pop song, like you're going, it's fast, and you're kind of, you just, okay, this is what I'm thinking about today, I'm just gonna write about today, and I'm gonna figure out how to make Luke Skywalker, do the things I'm thinking about today. And so it's fast and it's quick, and you're collaborating with other people. So the feel is different. I'm incredibly proud of my comics work too, but they're different because, as you were saying, I'm collaborating with people. With novels, it's all me, top to bottom. And with a comic, you're working, like I can write, let's say with Steve McNiven, who I worked on Death of Wolverine, I can say, okay, Steve, I need 4 pages of action, and I think these are the moments that I think would be really cool, like Wolverine, pops only 1 claw instead of 3, that'd be really neat. And so I can give him those beats, and then he'll kind of design it and make it feel comic booky, which means I don't have to think of every single element of it. In a novel, if I were writing a fight scene with Wolverine, I would have to devote my time to every single part of it. So it's nice because it's nice to have someone else to lean on in comics, but also I don't have total control. And so Steve is a genius and a really good friend, but to say we agree on every single thing when we tell a story is not true. And so there's compromise, you have to figure things out, and sometimes I have to let go of my vision a little bit to allow his vision in. So, which is almost always wonderful because I'm working with geniuses most of the time, but even then, sometimes there's conflict and you have to learn how to let go. So it's just different. They're both wonderful.
Thank you.
Here.
Maybe going into a little bit of that question about the novels and the comic books. How do you schedule your time? Today I'm gonna write for the novel, tomorrow I'm gonna write for the comic. Is that how you do it?
Yeah, so there's this term in making comics called you keep the artist fed, okay?
Right.
Because if an artist doesn't have script to draw, then they can't do their job, and they can't earn money, and they can't, the comics don't come out on time. And so, like right now, I'm working on, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ongoing comic series that I can think of off the top of my head. There might be more. Yeah. So what that means is that I have to write more than one script per week to make sure that all of the artists are fed and they always have stuff to draw. So I have a constant running, like this discussion has turned into Charles is crazy. But it's part of the job and I love it. So I don't consider this bad. I just consider it like I've trained myself to be able to do this.
Right.
And I'm very proud that it lets me write so much.
Right.
So in the back of my head, there's always like a ticking clock toward, okay, Alberto is going to be done with this issue on this day, which means he's going to need script the next day. And Will or Steve or Ryan, whoever the artists are going to be done here. So they're going to need new pages, and I have to think about that. So it's always ticking. So it's like, in a kitchen, like the next order's up. You have to do the next thing. So that's kind of how I do it. But at the same time, I have long-term projects. Like I'm working on a novel called Trials of the Jedi, which is the final High Republic novel, which will come out in 2025. So I did Light of the Jedi, which started it, and now Trials of the Jedi will finish it in 2025. And but that I have to work on steadily in the background while I'm also serving up all the other orders for everybody else. So it's just, I don't know, spinning plates? It's like spinning plates.
That's really good. That's a very good analogy, the kitchen. An interesting thing about your career that maybe people might not know about is that you were a practicing lawyer.
Yeah.
For years.
Yeah, many years.
While you were writing.
Yes, many.
That's something like most people would say, okay, I'm a lawyer, I'm done.
Yeah.
This is my career, I'm set for life. But you didn't do that.
No, I didn't. And part of it was that I knew I wanted this. I wanted a life of creativity. I always did. From when I was little, my mother had me playing violin at age 3. I started writing I wrote my first book, it was not very good, in 4th grade. And I always knew this was the path that I wanted. But, as you said, sometimes life pushes you in directions, and I got into a very good law school in the States, called Columbia, New York City. And so when you get into a school like that, it feels stupid to say I'm not going to.
Yeah.
So I went, but then you have student loans and you have to get a job and you work. And so my train got sort of shifted onto another track for a while. But I never stopped wanting to be back on this one. And so it was about trying to find a way to get myself back here while also not being stupid about giving up the income of a lawyer. So
right.
what I was trying to do was scale up writing while slowly scaling down being a lawyer. And I started my own practice. I did immigration work primarily, so visas and that sort of thing. And so I was able to, as writing started to become more successful, I just took fewer and fewer clients until finally in 2017 I stopped taking clients completely because I was doing well enough in writing that I knew I could do it full time, and I've never looked back.
That's awesome, and also inspiring. Because most of us have some passion that we maybe want to do, and you say, okay, I'm stuck here.
Hey, nobody's life is. There's only one point when your life is done, right?
Yeah.
We all know that point.
Right.
But if you're not there, you can make your life anything you want. It just might not happen overnight. It took me. I got out of the bar exam. That's the exam you take that lets you actually be a lawyer and practice law. I got out of that test. And I went to a stationery store, bookstore, and I bought a notebook, and I started writing my first novel in pencil, longhand, right away. And I didn't actually get published. That was 2000. You can run the numbers, see how old I am, but that's okay. So that was 2000. I didn't get published until 2009. So it was 9 years of trying, and then I didn't get published in a big way, which was DC, until 2013. So from the day I decided to change my life to get it back on track, it was 13 years. And then I didn't even quit being a lawyer until 2017. So it was really, think about that. And the key was just saying, it doesn't all have to happen in a day. My life is getting better for me day by day the closer my train starts going to the other track. Like, there were many victories and joyful things and stories told in those 17 years. And I got there eventually, and part of it is, it's cliched, we've all heard this, but you just don't give up,
Right.
And so I hope it is inspiring to people, not because I'm so great, but because I think it's just a true thing about life. Nobody's life is over until it is literally over. And if you want it to be different, you can make it different just by deciding and going in that direction. And even if you don't get all the way you think you should right away, just keep going, and it's better than it was before.
Were you going for comics or novels when you started out?
I started with novels.
Novels.
I actually wrote a novel that didn't sell. So that took me like 3 or 4 years because I was doing it at the same time as law, early law. And so I got an agent, and he took it out to a company, publishers, and they were like, "This is not for us. It's not professional enough, whatever." So I found that very discouraging because I'd spent years. But again, you just don't stop. You keep going. And so right around then, so this is around 2004, 2005. I thought, well, comics, they don't have the same barriers to entry that novels do. And you don't spend 3 years or 4 years working on a novel. You spend 3 or 4 months working on a novel. To the point where you can get it to pitch to a publisher and see if they want it. So I thought, well, I won't have to use as much time and as much energy writing comic ideas, so I just started moving to that. I've always loved comics too, since I was little.
And how do you get the opportunity to pitch to DC or Marvel? Is that through an agent?
The way that I did it back in the day, and I think it is still pretty much like this, is you have to find a way into comics as an unknown person.
Right.
You can either be so incredibly talented as an artist that if you show an editor pictures of your work or send them pictures of your work, they're like, "Holy shit, this is incredible. We have to hire this person." As a writer, it's much more difficult because you can't really send them prose. You need to send them comics, and it's difficult to get comics made unless you're already kind of a comics person. So. But generally speaking, the path is you make independent comics, and those independent comics, you go to things like this, you meet artists, you connect with other people who are trying to become comics creators.
Right. You
sell your comics at Artist Alley, you do all those things, and then you make connections, you get to know people, you understand the system, the network, and the power players, and over that time, you make better and better work. And so eventually, if you're lucky, a Marvel or DC editor will come to you and say, "I've heard about you. Would you like to do a 4-page story about the Winter Soldier, or a 4-page story about Squirrel Girl, or whatever it might be, and Donna Troy, whatever the character." And so then you do that. It's a tryout, and if you do well, you get more work. And for me, I started on Swamp Thing. DC almost immediately gave me work on another book called Red Lanterns. And then Marvel was like, "Who's this guy who has work, over at DC? Why don't we have him?" Because the easiest way to get work at Marvel is to get a bunch of work at DC, or vice versa. Right. Then they want to know who you are. And so Marvel came to me and said, "You want to write Thunderbolts?" And I said, "I absolutely want to write Thunderbolts." I took it over from a writer named Daniel Way. And then Marvel gave me She-Hulk, and DC gave me Superman and Wonder Woman. So I was at this time writing 5 books, and this was less than a year. I had just started. I was writing 5 books a month, 3 for DC, 2 for Marvel, and plus events and tie-in, crossovers, all these things. And then Marvel came to me and said, "Do you want to write Death of Wolverine?" Remember the story I told at the beginning? And I said, "Yes, I really do." And they said, "Okay, we will give you this incredible project that will launch your career if you do it right, but you have to quit all of your work at DC. You have to leave DC and sign exclusively with Marvel." And I said, "Well, okay, but if I'm going to give up three books a month at DC, the deal I signed with you guys has to make up for that." And so they said, "Okay, we can do that." And then they ended up giving me basically 6 books a month. It was a lot. Those early days were incredibly intense because I was still a lawyer. This is all still 2013, 2014. I was still running my own practice. So I was writing 6 books a month and running my law practice, which had employees, and you can't, are there any kids in here? Okay, the one thing you cannot do as a lawyer, especially like an immigration lawyer when you're dealing with people's lives, is fuck up. And it's just like being a doctor, right? There's malpractice, there's all kinds of bad things, but and even more than that, I didn't want to ruin somebody's life. I didn't want to have like a couple who were going to be married and wanted to live together in the US, or somebody who got a great job offer, or things like that. I didn't want to be the reason that was a mistake. And so but I also didn't want to mess up my ticket into the world that I really wanted to be in. So I just, lots of staying up till 2 in the morning, and lots of, just working, and being, lots of systems, lots of spreadsheets, lots of like, okay, I need to do this today, and just thinking it really through. So I was very detail-oriented. And it all paid off, but believe me, I was very happy to leave it behind, law, because the pressure of doing both at the same time was really hard.
You mentioned Red Lanterns. I had that question. I had the question like more later for the Q&A, but now that you mention it, I'm a big Green Lantern fan, and my favorite Green Lantern is Guy Gardner.
Oh, yeah.
So you worked on him on your run. Did you have any choice in like the choosing of the story with Guy Gardner? But what's that offer? Yeah, you actually.
Yeah. So I took that book over from. I feel terrible. I should know. There was another writer on it.
Yes.
I took it over with issue 19, I believe, but it was a British writer, Paul Cornell. It doesn't. I'm not going to say it doesn't matter. Of course it matters. But I can't. The fact that I can't remember today, like, quote, maybe doesn't matter so much.
It was over 10 years ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago. But so he had done an approach that did not have any of the main human lanterns in it. Right. It was all aliens. And you guys know Green Lantern, right? The premise is you get the green ring, and it's all based on willpower. Whereas Red Lanterns, they have a red ring, and their ring is powered by anger and rage. And so they're all people who have been hurt, traumatized, or very angry. And so they're like a badass kind of group of mean people. And my two big things that I wanted to do with that book when I took it over were to add a human. And I thought, well, who is the person that fits best in that group? And it was Guy Gardner. To me, it seemed obvious that Guy Gardner should be on that team. And the second thing was that I wanted them to feel different, right? In the previous incarnation, they felt like a religion, almost like a cult. Yeah. And I changed them to feel like a biker gang, because I thought that felt more like what Red Lanterns, like it was just more fun, like we all love cults, I guess, but I think reading about a cool space biker gang would be fun. So I did that, although there was a bit of controversy, because I gave Guy Gardner like a big mustache, and which I thought, again, it looked like a guy in a biker gang. It looked awesome, and there were people at DC who were not as happy about that. They thought he looked like, I don't know, like not the way a DC character should look, basically. So there was a lot of struggle about Guy Gardner's facial hair, but it worked out. It worked out in the end.
Something about that run, I loved your take on Guy Gardner. He's a character that not all writers, I believe, get right, because mostly they go to him being a jerk.
Yeah.
And I loved your take on him, because you made him the best parts of him shine. There's a few scenes with Ice, where he goes and tries to get her back, and then they go to the beach. Mm-hmm. And there's also a scene with Jon Stewart when in a bar fight. Yeah. Those are the types of things that I enjoy the most of the Green Lantern mythos, because there's just so many characters. So what are your thoughts on Guy Gardner as a character, and how do you think, or how would you like him to be depicted on the new Superman film?
Okay, well, I think one of the important things about characters who come across as jerks on the page, right? And even in real life, right? Like, I'm sure we all know people in real life who are like, that person's a jerk, right? But nobody gets there from nowhere. Nobody starts off, nobody's born a jerk. Like, things happen to people in their lives, and so when they're acting in a way that's, angry or frustrated or cruel or mean or any of those things, it's because things have happened to them. And I honestly really don't think anyone wants to think of themselves as a bad person. or a jerk. You know, they just sort of respond to what's happened to them in their past and what's going on in their future. So Guy Gardner is somebody who had, like, you know, he grew up in a situation where, like, being a tough guy was important, and never acting weak and never showing any weakness, I suppose. And so, and in a culture like in, you know, like working Baltimore, where it was important to never back down and to always show that you're ready to get your fist up and get into a fight if you need to, and that's his background. But that doesn't necessarily mean he thinks of himself that way. It doesn't mean he wants to fight people or hurt people or make people upset. It's kind of where he came from. And so when you start thinking, okay, this is a person who doesn't see themselves as a jerk, why are they that way, and what are the moments when they're not acting like that? And it's, you know, it's about your friends and your family. Like even the worst person you know probably has moments in their life when they're nice, when they're with their friends having a beer in the bar or whatever the thing might be. And so it's finding those moments for somebody like Guy, and honestly, he's a hero too. You know, like he needs to be a hero. And I thought that's why one of the reasons I thought he would be so good in Red Lanterns, because he's clearly very angry. He's an angry character, but like working through your anger is how you let things go in your past, and then you're not as angry, and it's just everything's more peaceful.
And that makes it interesting.
Yes, interesting. Oh, we got another.
Hello, hi. So I read you had Asian and Middle Eastern studies.
Yeah.
So I was interested in how does that influence your work?
So when I was in high school, my family moved to Hong Kong. And so we lived there for many years. I know, my life is weird. I had a lot of things happen in my life. So we moved to Hong Kong, I lived there, then we moved to Manila, and then we moved to Singapore. So some of that time I was in college in Philadelphia, but I would always, like, I spent a lot of the year, because summer breaks and things like that, in those places. And while I was in school, I majored in Chinese, so I speak Mandarin. And in terms of how that has influenced my storytelling, you know, I'm definitely what they call a Sinophile. Like, I'm interested in China's culture and history and all those things. But more important than that, I moved from Michigan, you know, which is a pretty ordinary state in the middle of the United States. And the things I had seen growing up in Michigan did not prepare me for moving across the world when I was in high school and seeing, you know, back then Hong Kong was still a British colony, and so it was extremely cosmopolitan, extremely international, extremely just full of sights and sounds and tastes and smells, much like Puerto Rico, that I had not experienced before, and it was mind blowing and mind expanding, because just by living there, you know, like here we're in the Caribbean, and so like there's places around that are easy to visit. And just like that, when you live in Hong Kong, there are places around that are easy to visit. Those places, though, are like Thailand and Japan and Australia and, you know, so on. So I was seeing these places and seeing these cultures that were completely new to me and completely opened me up to all these different ideas and thoughts. I think living in one place your whole life can make you think that is kind of the whole world. It's sort of natural. But living in all these different places and seeing all these different places really not only made me appreciate all of the other parts of the world and people of the world, but like I was gracious for them. Like I was like, oh my God, I don't want to die without having seen as much as I can, because everything's fascinating. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so going back to comics, how cool is it that you get to work with characters like Superman and Guy Gardner and Daredevil, Wolverine, and how does that compare when you're working with your own created material?
So one of the things working with, let's say, Daredevil is a great example, right? So Daredevil, I did a long run on Daredevil for several years, from I think 2015 to 2018. That had a lot of exciting things in it. I'm very, very proud of that run. I did a lot of the work with Ron Garney, who was an incredible artist, a lot of other really good artists. It was awesome. But if you know anything about Daredevil and Daredevil's history, it's like some of the absolute best writers and artists in comics have worked on Daredevil. From, you know, I mean, Stan Lee, but Frank Miller is an obvious one, but there's a lot. Like every writer, Brian Michael Bendis, Brubaker, they're just Mark Waid, it goes on and on and on and on and on. And so when I took over, I was taking over from Mark Waid's run. He had just won like a lot of Eisners with Chris Somney, who's also one of the best artists in the business. And it was very intimidating. But one thing that was good about it is that any story I wrote would have all of the goodwill of all those other stories sort of pushing it forward. Like think of a sailboat being pushed forward by the wind. Because when people think of a Daredevil story, they're like, oh wow, some of my favorite comic book experiences ever have been in Daredevil, and maybe I'll get another one again from this Charles Soule guy. So that's a plus. You know, people are wanting to be good, and you can also use the language that other people have established to sort of do shortcuts. Like you all know that Daredevil has radar vision, like he can sort of see things around him like a bat, and so I can do fun tricks with that because you already know it. I don't have to explain it because it's something everybody who reads the character already knows. So all of that is really cool. It also means though that in a way, every story I'm writing is being compared with Frank Miller's stories on Daredevil, which is not as good because Frank Miller's stories are considered to be some of the most classic stories in all of comics, not just for Daredevil, but period. And so that is something you have to put aside and just say, look, this is my time at bat. I'm gonna do the best I can. It's gonna be amazing. It's not gonna be Frank Miller. Trying to be Frank Miller would be stupid, so I didn't do that. I leaned into what I knew, which was being a lawyer. And so I was the only lawyer who's ever written Daredevil, and so I used a lot of that experience into the way Daredevil worked in my run, which made it not like anybody else's run on Daredevil, which I think is good. In terms of writing my own stories though, so like right now, I'm working on several series, many of which again, I have copies of at my table right now. And there's one called 8 Billion Genies, which is a book that I am very, very proud of. It was a huge success for me and Brian Brown. We created it together. Came out last year from Image. The premise of the book is that everyone on Earth gets a genie and one wish at exactly the same moment. So like you can see everybody in this room, like a little genie would pop up over your shoulder and say, hey, I'm your genie, what do you want? And everybody has it. So, okay? And so how that plays out in practice is people start to make their wishes because little kids get them and they're not gonna be patient, they're not gonna be thoughtful, they're just gonna wish for, 100,000 pounds of ice cream, whatever the thing is that they think they want. And so the world starts getting very chaotic and very crazy very quickly, but there are also people who are thoughtful and smart, or they wish for things that are unselfish, or they are like, well, I'm gonna maybe wait and see what happens to the world, or I'm gonna wish for safety, wish for this room to be completely safe so that no wishes can do anything to this room. And a lot of people connected with that story because everybody has a wish. If you were offered a wish, you would probably think of things. And it was also, I think, something that people were like, well, how would that even be a story? How could that play out over the course of the story? And I don't know if some of you read it, but I'm seeing some nodding, some of you have. So you know how we did it. We started with a bar in Michigan, again, because that's what I know, where the bartender immediately wishes, I wish no wish made outside this bar could affect this bar or anyone inside it. And there's 8 people in the bar. And so then we follow those people as they start to observe what happens outside the bar, which is crazy, and then how they figure out how they're gonna make their own wishes. It is a really, really fun story. Again, I have it at my table. But what was great about it is that Ryan and I, it wasn't just me, but Ryan and I got to make all those decisions ourselves. Nobody was telling us, well, 20 years ago, the genies did this, so you can't do it now, or we got to sail completely by our own compass and make it exactly what we want it to be. Even if there were decisions that were like, characters died, or characters do things you might not be happy with, or just anything we wanted. And that level of freedom is part of why the book is as good as it is, and why people connected to it the way that they did. But also, it meant nobody had ever heard of it, right? And I'm pitching it to you guys today because I know how to. Like I've been working on this book for years. I know how it works. I know what people respond to. But when we started, there was nothing. It was just everybody gets a wish at the same time, and then trying to make that into a story that would work, even getting people to understand why they would want to read it. It's an effort because Daredevil's not in it, Darth Vader's not in it, and so why would anybody care about something with a bunch of characters they don't know anything about? And so our job was to make them care, and it's hard. So creator-owned, the freedom is unbelievable. It's key. You can do anything you want, but you run into the issue of people not giving a shit. right? Fortunately, I'm in a place in my career where usually people care to some degree when I put something new out. But when I put out a new Star Wars story, because of my pedigree in that world, like, even without my pedigree, like if I write a story about Kylo Ren, which I have done, but if I were to do another one, people would pick it up just because Kylo Ren's
Right.
which is nice.
Cool. Sticking with the 8 billion genies, I wanted to ask about how did that idea came about, and what was the significance of the number 8? Because it's 8 issues,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And it's 8 people, 8 seconds, 8.
Yep.
Yeah, there's always 8.
So initially, the project was called 7 Billion Genies. And the reason why is because Ryan Brown, so Ryan Brown is an incredible artist. He lives in Chicago. He's one of my best friends in the entire world. He can draw anything, but more importantly, he can draw anything and make it funny, which is very hard to do in comics. Like, comics are a medium of, like, you don't think about it because you think of comics like they move in your mind as you're reading them, but they're really just static images. It's not a movie. And so making visual gags work and making things funny is harder than drawing a fight scene by many orders of magnitude. Drawing emotion is really hard, and making people be like, oh, haha, that's very clever and funny is really hard. He is an absolute genius at it, a master. And so I feel very lucky that I get to work with him at all, and I feel lucky that we have done as much as we have, because we did 8 Billion Genies together. We did a long series before that called Curse Words, which I have one copy of left at the table, and that was about evil wizards who tell everybody they're good wizards and it goes badly. And then we did a couple of things before that. We're working on something new now. But all of that time together means we spent a lot of time hanging out and having, just long conversations and having drinks and just, dinners and all that stuff. And one of the things we used to do early on was just try to make each other laugh. We have a sense of humor that overlaps, but it's not identical. So I will think of jokes, he won't, and vice versa. And so one of the things we did was coming up with ideas for stories that can't be told, like little quick one-liners of impossible stories. And at that time, he said, I got one, everyone gets a genie at the same time. And, and I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, somebody would just wish for the world to be a pile of batteries, and it would be over immediately. I'm like, well, I don't know. I actually think there's something really interesting about that idea. I think we should hold on to it. And so he's like, I don't care, whatever, man. That's a stupid idea. Do whatever you want. And so when we finished Curse Words, we were thinking about what should the next thing be, and we were kicking around all these different ideas, many of which we retained. There's there's one that this was mine that I really like, called The Ghost and the GoBot. And the idea of that one is you have a Transformers, right?
Right, yeah.
Okay, GoBots, they're kind of like knockoff Transformers. And you know how there's Bumblebee had that friend in the animated cartoon, I think his name's Skip, isn't that his friend? Something like that. He was like a teenage guy that hung out, drove in the car with him and stuff. And so the idea of The Ghost and the GoBot is that a GoBot, like a Corvette or something, makes friends with a teenage boy. They're going to go have adventures, and the boy gets in the car, and they're going to go drive off and do an adventure, and then the GoBot accidentally transforms with the guy inside. And so the boy, the teen is killed, but his ghost is around. And so you have the story of the ghost and the GoBot, and they're going around having adventures, and his bones are still in the car.
Now I need to read that.
Well, yeah, we will make it one day, but the point is, most of the ideas we have are like that. They're like Ghost and the GoBot. They're very funny, and they're fun. You kind of want to see what it is, but I thought 8 Billion Genies, 7 Billion Genies at the time, had the potential to really be something powerful, because you're dealing with questions of desire and wishes and your hearts and all these things that we all have, universality. And so when we came out of Curse Words, we kicked around lots of ideas that were not, we're Ghost and the GoBot level, fun. We would have had a great time with them, but they didn't seem to have that, okay, this is really special and worth the time. And I went back into the Genie story, and I started thinking about how I would do it. And I came up with that idea of the bar that I mentioned, that you have a safe haven that you can experience the story through, and then that opened everything up. But because so much time, this has been years since Brian and I first started talking about it, the world's population was much closer to 8 billion than it was to 7 billion. So we just changed it to 8 billion genies. And the idea is that since there's one for everybody on Earth, it's 8 billion. And I like structure, I like rules, it might be the lawyer in me, but I like building things into the stories that kind of like let you understand it on a structural level, especially with something that's total chaos, like a world of genies. And so you build in ways for readers to kind of lock into it. And in this case, it was an 8-issue story where the first issue covers the first 8 minutes from the genies appearing, the second one is the first 8 hours, the third one is the first 8 days, 8 weeks, 8 months, and so on, all the way to 800 years, the first 8 centuries. And so by the end of the story, you've gotten to see through these characters what happens to the world in 800 years after these genies appear. And you understand why they showed up, what they're here for, what they're asking of us, and it's really, really cool. And I'm very proud of the way Ryan's incredible sensibilities and skill meshed with my particular skill set of like figuring out how to make stories work, and that's what we did.
I thought
That's
it was
awesome.
related about the infinite symbol.
Hey, what?
Okay, I was.
Oh,
Infinity symbol, yeah, that's part of it
Yeah.
too. That's part of it too. It all
So
comes
connected.
together in this really satisfying way. You can feel that it just clicks.
If anybody here has not read 8 billion genies, you have to.
Okay.
Like, it's really good.
At the table.
It's at the
It's on the
table,
table,
yeah.
yeah.
I got the artist alley. If you go in the dorm, all the way to the right in the middle against the wall.
Yeah.
So.
Got it.
So most of your like creative work is like what if stories. Like what
Yes.
if
Yep.
you got 8 billion genies? What if the United States goes
Goes
to
up,
the
yep,
right?
yep.
That's Undiscovered Country, which
Yep.
you're writing with Scott Snyder.
Yep.
Is that influenced by current politics stuff in some way?
Undiscovered Country, we started working on that book in 2016, 2017, maybe later, 2017, I think. And it started coming out in 2019.
Right.
And so, you know, I mean, America is a place that is very strange right now. It is not necessarily the place that I grew up in. And it doesn't matter which side of the political divide you're on. There is very clearly a political divide that is extremely strong in the United States right now. You know, I don't know how that manifests down here. I'm sure that it does, though.
Yep.
And so, thinking about, you know, like how Scott and I wanted to talk about that, because we love our country and care about it and want it to be as strong and unified as possible. We thought about what would be the thing that would cause that to happen. Like, what was the science fiction scenario we could think of to try to explore those ideas? And so the story of Undiscovered Country is that one day out of nowhere, America just seals its borders completely. So this is the continental United States. So not Alaska, not Hawaii, not here, but like the 48 states. And then it builds these crazy science fiction walls all around it, satellites, you cannot go there. And so nobody goes in or out of the United States for 30 years. And then one day they send a message saying, come see what we've become. And so an expedition goes in like Jurassic Park style, and then they go over that wall and they see what America's become. And America has become totally wild. It's like kind of science fiction Wizard of Oz stuff with all these different zones. There's like 13 zones, and each one is very different, and they've all, it's sort of, it's a little satirical, right? It's like Gulliver's Travels or something, where all of the different zones, they could work, but mostly it's our ability to talk about, well, what if America became a place that was only about technology? Or what if America became a place that was only about total freedom for everybody, and there were no laws whatsoever, or very focused on religion, or very focused on agriculture, whatever the things might be. And so we have our expedition that has been traveling through the United States, seeing all of these different zones, getting closer and closer to the middle. And we are almost done with the series. We have issue 29 is being made now. I'm writing issue 30. That's my project for this weekend, actually, while I'm doing this, is writing issue 30. And then we will have 6 more. The series will go to issue 36.
You should put like a Puerto Rico Easter egg somewhere in there. So.
We have. I mean, we've thought about, because people ask us those questions, like, well, okay, what about Guam? Okay, here's the deal with Guam. But yeah, Puerto Rico, we know what happened here, which is basically, what happened with Puerto Rico is that you guys became independent and you started doing your own thing, which was very nice, and then there are two big empires in the world that arise when America goes away. One is basically Europe and Africa and the Middle East, and then the other one is like Asia and India and sort of the Pacific, south of like Australia and all those things. And they both start getting new colonies, and Puerto Rico gets absorbed into what's called the AEA, the Alliance, what do I call it? It's Alliance Euro-Afrique, so it's the French, European African Alliance. And so that's where you guys.
That's cool.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, question.
Well, yeah, sí, es micrófono. Yeah.
Since you've been writing as a kid, how do you improve your skills from the past till now to become a better writer?
Just write constantly. Write every day. Read all the time. Think about things. And push yourself. So, it's very easy for me to write an action sequence. Like I've done hundreds and hundreds of them. And the thing that is not as easy is to say, okay, what is an action sequence that I have never done before? And then the thing that's even harder is what is an action sequence that no one has ever done before? And so I can be my version of lazy, which is not very lazy, but my version of lazy is to just be like, I don't have to push myself that far. I just am gonna write it, I'm gonna get it done, and it will be definitely professional level because I am a very qualified professional writer at this point. Whatever I do, it's gonna be publishable, it will be acceptable, it will be good. But then there's the level where it's like, am I pushing myself? Am I going to the next level? And I think that single question I keep asking myself is how I get better. I force myself to get better because for people who have been following me since the Red Lanterns days, for example, they don't want to see me do the same thing over and over again. And I think, I want to reward myself for being in this career, and I want to reward people who follow me all this way. I don't think I don't know that you would have expected 8 billion genies out of the guy who wrote Red Lanterns, right? I don't know that I would have. I don't know that I would have either, but I'm really glad that I did it, and I think that basic quality is partly why I still have as successful a career as I do.
We're almost running out of time, so we'll go to my last 3 questions. 8 billion genies and Undiscovered Country have both been picked up.
Yeah.
Any update on that?
Yeah, so 8 Billion Genies is being developed as a movie by Amazon Studios, which is very exciting. They were doing it for live action, which would be really interesting to see how they do some of that stuff in live action. And it's even cooler than that because the Amazon hired producers to help bring it to the screen, envision it, and those are it's a company called Point Grey, which is Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. So they've done Invincible, The Boys, lots and lots of amazing things, and not just amazing stories, but specifically comics to film adaptations. So they know how to take a book from the page and get it on the screen. So we're very excited about that. They've also hired a writer named Rodney Rothman, who is an Oscar winner, and the movie he won the Oscar for was Into the Spider-Verse. Exactly, that was my reaction too. That was exactly how I felt about it too. So now we're in a position where we have incredible talent behind this book that we both really think is great, that has connected with audiences all over the place. It's sold zillions of copies as a book. And so you never can be sure with these things. Hollywood projects vanish all the time, and this could certainly be one of them, but this one feels as likely to go as anything that I've ever worked on has, and I'm very hopeful that's the update on that one. Undiscovered Country is sort of more in process, and I can't speak about it with as much detail, but Scott and I, Giuseppe Camuncoli, who's the artist on the project, who is incredible. He did the Darth Vader run with me, and hopefully we'll do awesome stuff in the future too. So we own it together, the 3 of us, and so we are in active discussions about what an adaptation would look like on that one. But also Schroeder College, which is I'm doing that book with, they're all, almost all of them are in various stages. Letter 44 is just had some great news.
So that's also very right.
Yeah, Hell to Pay is part of the big Schroeder College universe. Both Letter 44 and the Schroeder College are being developed by Seth MacFarlane's company, and that looks really good for TV. My novels are in various stages of development. Oracle, You're Anyone, Endless Vessel, they're all kind of in various ways. And so I think when you earlier you mentioned that my stories start with what if,
right.
That is part of why I think they tend to work well in adaptation spaces because people, it's very easy to hook into a good what if.
Right. Star Wars: The Acolyte is just
Yeah.
around the corner. That's based on the final days of the High Republic, if I'm not mistaken.
It's late in the High Republic, yes.
How involved are you at all in that project as a consultant for Lucasfilm? And any hints you can give us about that?
So Leslie Headland is the primary creative person on The Acolyte. She did Russian Doll, which is an amazing series on
Really good.
Netflix, and a lot of other things. She's incredibly skilled and talented. And most importantly, she's a huge Star Wars fan and a huge fan of the High Republic in a way that was extremely gratifying. Do you guys know what the High Republic is? Have you heard of it? Okay, so more or less. I'll give you the quick one too. So the High Republic is an era of Star Wars that starts, I don't know, we haven't actually defined the exact starting point, but the stories that we decided to tell take place about 200 years before Episode 1. And it is a golden age of the Republic. The Sith are not around. The Jedi are very much ascendant, and they're doing great things all over the universe, it's very cool to write about Jedi at their height. And so it's all new characters, with a few exceptions, people like Yoda, right? Because Yoda lives for a long time, Maz Kanata. But the Jedi of this time encounter a very significant threat in a group of people called the Nile, who are basically just dedicated to tearing down the Republic because they don't like being told what to do, essentially. So that's the story that I have been telling as part of the High Republic. It was created by a group of 5 writers, a brain trust that Lucasfilm hired. It was me, Claudia Gray, Justina Ireland, Daniel Jose Older, and Kevin Scott. And we started working on this thing in, I want to say, 2018, and the first project came out in January of 2021, which was my novel, Light of the Jedi, which debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. So it's very exciting. People seem very ready for a new era of Star Wars with new characters, with, Darth Vader's story from childhood to death.
Yeah.
You know Luke Skywalker's story from childhood to death. These characters you do not know, and so you get to put them in scenarios that are surprising and exciting. So that's what the High Republic is. It's got adult novels, young adult novels, kids books, comics, all these different formats. And because it has been as successful as it has, they have expanded it into other mediums. So there are video games that use the High Republic now. There are TV shows. There's one called Young Jedi Adventures, which is it's like a little kid show, very, very fun and cool. And then there's the show The Acolyte. And so The Acolyte is set a ways after the story that we've been telling with the Nile. It's set further into the High Republic era, closer to the beginning of sort of the Republic that we see in Phantom Menace. And a trailer just dropped, which was amazing. If you haven't seen it, it was the most watched trailer for any Star Wars thing in a long time. So I'm not surprised that you've seen it. I know a lot about it, and I'm trying to be very cautious about what I say because I don't want, it would be very bad if I gave things away that I'm not supposed to give away. But what I can say is that it is, first of all, incredibly cool because this era did not exist before the 5 of us sat down and made it up.
That's awesome.
So what the Jedi wear, what the ships they fly in, the things that they talk about, the way their philosophies work, we made that up, and now you're going to see it walking and talking in a way that is not half-ass, right? Like, Leslie is a true fan. Lucasfilm really got behind it. It is beautiful. It's very exciting. It's very cool. I give it my highest endorsement, I guess is what I would say, or what I can say. And I think it begins June 4th, and I think you will all really like it very much. So that's what I can say.
Okay. So I have 2 more questions.
Yep.
What's next for you? Do you see yourself like maybe becoming a director or a showrunner or a head writer for a show or something like that? Let's go with that first.
Yeah, I mean, to answer the question, to sort of follow on the question that the gentleman there asked earlier, I'm always about what's the next challenge, what's the thing I haven't done. And working in film and TV, I have done some screenwriting, and I like it, but so far, one of the mountains I haven't climbed is what you said, being a showrunner, being a director, all of that stuff. I would love to do it. I think that I have a lot of ideas that would translate well to film stuff in a way that would be just great. And I grew up in movies and TV, and I'd love to do that. So am I going to? I guess we'll have to see. But I would love to.
Okay. And last question. 8 billion G's suddenly pop up right now.
Yes.
What are you wishing for?
Well, I would probably, I would protect the people I love. Is what I would do, and that's the only real answer that I think makes sense in an 8 billion genius scenario. And you see some of that happening in the story. People make those wishes. There's also other fun ideas like wishing yourself back in time, wishing yourself to different places. Wishing for things that you really you can't get any other way. For me, the boring answer is safety, right? But it's an apocalypse scenario. That's what you wish for. The exciting answer is probably finding safety through some sort of enhancement of myself. So becoming a superhero, basically. Giving myself awesome powers, because then you can kind of achieve the same thing, right? If
you can protect your family.
Yeah, exactly. There's robots all around. You can beat up some robots, whatever. So that would be fun. Who doesn't like? I don't know. The sort of similar questions, what superpower would you give yourself? Mine would probably be either teleporting or time travel, because that's kind of remember we were talking about the travel stuff when my mind opened?
Yeah.
That's the same thing. I could travel anywhere I wanted, do anything I wanted, see whatever I wanted, learn whatever I wanted, and time travel would give me the same opportunity. I would not wish for immortality though, because I think one of the things that's important about life is that it ends. And so you have to use the time you have as best as you can.
That's awesome. Charles Soule.
Thank you.